They told him he didn't belong in first class, not because of a missing ticket, but because of the color of his skin. What happened next? No shouting, no courtroom. Just a quiet seat, a deeper plan, and a collapse that echoed through every airport in the country. This is not just a story, it's a reckoning in the sky. Where are you listening from right now? Type your city or country in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel. This is just one of many stories that prove truth doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just sits down. The boarding gate buzzed under sterile airport lights. Gate 23's screen blinked in passive blue. Orion Air's 771, Miami to London, now boarding, first class. A line had already formed, sharply divided. On the left, economy. On the right, first class, where only tailored suits and pearls seemed to belong. Malik Drayton stood at the edge. 6'2", deep mahogany skin, steel gray Zegna blazer, eyes calm but alert. In one hand, he held his platinum boarding pass. The other, empty, steady. He moved toward the first-class lane, silent. Not a swagger, no announcement of presence, just precision, but presence nonetheless. The kind that unsettles those who think power always looks familiar. As he approached, the boarding agent extended a hand, but before she could scan, someone else intervened. Carla Vance, head flight attendant. Blonde, upright posture, sharp smile worn like a badge. She appeared from behind the check-in counter, heels clacking against the linoleum like punctuation. She didn't speak to the agent, didn't scan the ticket, didn't ask Malik his name. She just looked at him, up, down. And then with 2 fingers she plucked the boarding pass from his hand and tore it in half. "You're in the wrong lane," she said flatly. "Try economy, or whatever class you people book." For a second the terminal froze. The man behind Malik shifted uncomfortably. A woman in pearls clutched her purse tighter. No one said anything. No one stopped her, but no one could look away either. Malik didn't blink. He bent slowly, picked up the shredded pass, folded the pieces and slid them into his pocket like receipts he planned to revisit later. Then, without a word, he stepped past Carla and onto the jet bridge. Inside the aircraft, the lighting changed. Softer, tinted with a golden hue meant to whisper luxury. 8 leather seats spread across the first-class cabin like thrones. 2A was his. He walked down the narrow aisle past passengers who suddenly found great interest in their magazines. The air smelled faintly of citrus and upholstery, clean, silent. He hung his jacket in the overhead compartment, lowered himself into the seat, and exhaled quietly. His fingers interlaced. His eyes stared forward. The seat controls glowed softly. Recline, lumbar, light, call, all green, not for long. The cabin remained still, until she returned. Carla entered the first-class section with that same posture, like she was walking into a courtroom where she was judge and jury. She stood at his row, arms behind her back, not a smile this time, just scrutiny. "Are you sure you're supposed to be here?" she asked. Malik turned his head slightly, didn't answer. Carla leaned in, voice low but crisp. "Money doesn't buy everything, especially not credibility, especially not access." She held a scanner in one hand, lifted it lazily, and pointed it at Malik's seat console. The machine beeped once, twice, then a red flash. "No record," she said, almost gleeful. "Looks like you've been reassigned." Malik reached slowly into his inner breast pocket and removed a platinum membership card. Thick, weighty, engraved with the initials MD. He placed it on the tray table. Carla barely glanced at it. "Nice trinket," she muttered. "Still doesn't change the system." She turned and walked off, leaving the card untouched. Malik didn't move. A man 2 rows up lowered his newspaper just enough to see. A woman across the aisle adjusted her scarf not for comfort, but to block her peripheral view. At that moment, the aircraft door had not yet closed. The ground crew outside was still loading bags, unaware that something heavier than luggage was about to be lifted into the air. Malik's face remained expressionless, but behind that stillness, gears turned. Every insult, every assumption, every quiet compliance was being recorded, not by camera, but by calculation. He wasn't here to argue, he was here to watch the system collapse under the weight of its own arrogance, and it had already begun. The of the cabin was low and polite, like a room full of people pretending they weren't listening. Malik sat in 2A, silent, posture composed, hands clasped lightly on his lap. He hadn't touched a single control since taking his seat, yet something had already changed. He reached to adjust his reading light. Nothing. He pressed the call button. No chime, no light. He toggled the recline function. The seat remained upright, rigid. Then came the footsteps, measured, almost theatrical. Carlo stood before him again, tablet in hand, eyebrows lifted in rehearsed concern. "Looks like your seat's having some technical hiccups," she said, tapping the screen with 2 fingers. "Safety protocol requires us to disable any malfunctioning unit." She tapped once more. A small red icon blinked on Malik's console. Malik didn't speak. His eyes tracked every motion of her fingers, then settled on the tablet. For a second, Carla's hand twitched, barely perceptible, but enough to betray something. She knew, he knew. From 3 rows back, a phone tilted subtly in the air. Leo Finn, young, wiry, hoodie tucked under his knees, had been filming since takeoff procedures began. Not overtly, just enough. He zoomed in on Malik's dead console, then up to Carla's narrowed eyes. "This is so not a glitch," Leo whispered to himself. He tapped a caption onto the screen. "Seat silence." In the corner of the screen, Malik's profile remained perfectly still. Back in 25D, an elderly woman with silver hair and a navy cardigan peered over the edge of economy's bulkhead divider. Her face held no expression, just eyes that had seen it before. Mama rose. She watched not just her son, but the ritual of dismissal. She had lived through the version without cameras or hashtags, the one with train cars, back doors, and signs that didn't need to be posted to be enforced. Her hands folded in her lap, she whispered under her breath, "Same script, different stage." Up front, Carlo was still narrating for no one in particular. "We'll see if tech support can look into it once we're airborne. For now, I'd advise staying seated." She turned to leave, pausing just long enough to tap her stylus again. The icon on Malik's panel blinked once more, this time turning solid red. Leo caught it all. So did Malik. As Carla disappeared toward the galley, Malik reached down and retrieved a slim, matte-Drek tablet from his carry-on. It lit up at his touch, facial recognition engaging without a sound. The interface looked nothing like a commercial device. Black screen, white text, lines of code scrolled briefly, then stopped. Malik tapped once, then twice, then let the device sit open on the tray in front of him. Across the aisle, a man in a navy blazer pretended to read, but peeked sideways at the glowing device. Leo whispered into his phone mic, "Okay, this guy's not just a passenger." A soft chime rang out overhead, signaling final cabin checks. Carla reappeared briefly to scan rows with robotic formality. Her eyes flicked past 2A without stopping. Malik didn't look up. From the rear, Mama Rose continued to watch. The corner of her mouth pulled tight, not in disapproval, but in memory. The same posture, the same silence, the same battle, this time with softer uniforms and more expensive screens. She pressed her palm to her chest once, and waited. So did Malik. The quiet had settled again. The kind of lull that never meant peace, just anticipation. Passengers whispered behind screens, behind paperback novels held too high to be real reading. Malik sat unchanged, still, unmoved. But the cabin? It was shifting. A soft buzz came from the galley door, then a hiss. And Tobias Klein walked in. He looked out of place in first class, short-sleeved button-up, greasy tablet in hand, slight gut pushing against his Orion Air tech vest. He scanned the cabin like a man looking for problems he hoped were easy to fake. Carla met him halfway down the aisle, her voice low but not private. Row 2A, logged a seat error, light, recline, console, everything. Tobias nodded once without even glancing at the seat. He stopped at Malik's row, thumb already sliding across his tablet. Passenger Drayton, right? Malik gave no reply. Tobias glanced at the seat's control panel, didn't touch it. He tapped twice on his screen, then looked at Carla. Yeah, he said. Confirmed system fault. I'll flag it as a hardware issue, not fixable in flight. No inspection, no tools, no testing, just words. Carla smiled with a kind of relief that wasn't about safety. Appreciate it, she said, and turned away. Tobias followed. Malik's eyes, however, followed Tobias's screen. He had seen the flicker, a line of code not part of Orion's approved UI, a manual override, inserted by someone with backdoor credentials, and he knew that because he had designed those credentials. He tapped a quick gesture onto his own Mathlek tablet. A new window opened. It tracked Tobias' device through a silent handshake protocol. Unauthorized command detected, the log read. Malik pressed one icon. The system began recording. 3 rows back, Leo Finn leaned forward just enough to frame everything. Tobias at the seat, Carla nodding, and Malik stood and watching. Leo's thumb hovered, then hit Go Live. A faint shimmer of signal caught in the corner of his screen. Hey everyone, Leo whispered into the mic. We've got a situation here. Guy in first class. Black. Calm. Not making a scene. Just got labeled system error. No check, no fix, just denied. And now the tech walked away. He paused, then added, Watch this space. Viewers climbed. 270, 540, 900. Across the aisle, another passenger lowered her designer sunglasses. Yuna Park. She wore a bone-white trench coat, glossy nails, and a look that didn't tolerate stupidity. Her phone was already recording, but now she added audio. Passenger in 2A has had seat functions disabled. Technician confirms fault without inspection. Attendant nods without question. I've seen this script before, her caption read, seat stripping. On her phone screen, Malik was framed perfectly, still, silent, backlit like the eye of a storm. Carla passed through first class again, pretending to check seatbelts. She glanced once at Yuna, then away quickly. He didn't see Leo. Didn't see the live count. 1,400. Malik tapped once more on his tablet. A marker appeared. Phase trigger event logged. No one saw it, but Elijah Tran, 6 rows behind in economy, got the ping. He looked up. Back in first class, Tobias had returned to the galley, whistling like he'd fixed something. Yuna zoomed in on his face. Her feed was already being mirrored by a political TikTok page. Her DMs filled with questions. Who's the man in 2A? Is this real time? Tag his name, Leo whispered. We don't know his name yet, but we're going to know his power. And Malik? He didn't flinch. He sat. He waited, because the moment was building, and the cabin was watching. The hum of the engines faded into the background, no longer noticed by the passengers who now eyed 2A as if it were a stage. Malik had not moved, not spoken, not blinked out of rhythm, but something about his stillness now carried weight, like gravity. Carla re-entered the first-class cabin, this time alone. Her steps were slower, composed, her tone wrapped in the faux illness that so often came after the first blow. Mr. Drayton, she said, some of our passengers have asked for additional verification for seating security. I'm sure you understand. She paused, as if expecting a challenge. Malik said nothing. Instead, he reached calmly into his blazer, pulled out a thin leather wallet, and from it a gold metal card. Not a credit card. There was no logo, no bank emblem. Just a name, Malik Drayton. Beneath it, etched into the gold, Platinum Access, Strategic Stakeholder. Carla hesitated. Her eyes scanned the card, then flicked up to his face. "That doesn't register on our manifest," she said, the edge returning to her voice. "It wouldn't," Malik replied, his voice level, low. "Your manifests isn't updated for internal ownership structure." A pause. A beat too long. Carla tried to recover, a small shrug. "Still, for security purposes, I need to confirm." "You've already confirmed everything," he said, "the moment you logged me out of the seat system." She opened her mouth again, but Malik had already tucked the card back into his wallet. The conversation closed as quickly as it had begun. A few seats away, Yuna's camera caught it all. She leaned slightly, eyes narrowing. "Strategic stakeholder?" She pulled out her phone, typed the name into a financial search tool. Nothing direct, but a thread emerged. A press release from 2 years ago about Orion Air's restructuring. An unnamed private party had purchased 54% of the Class B shares. Yuna bit her lip. "Oh my God," she muttered. Behind her, Leo's stream continued. Comments now flooded the screen. "Is that a shareholder ID? Wait, did that say stakeholder? This man owns the airline." In the rear of the cabin, Elijah tapped a single button on his modified tablet. A satellite symbol began to pulse. "Uplink established." He smiled slightly, then minimized the screen. Back in 2A, Malik adjusted the tray table forward and laid his own device flat. The screen lit up again, this time not with flight controls or logs, but with a dashboard marked Orion Air, Command Access Portal Access Level, Owner Class, Passenger Manifest, Cabin Systems, Live Security Feeds, all accessible. But he didn't touch anything, yet. He let it glow, just long enough. Yuna caught the edge of the screen. She wasn't sure what she was seeing, until a brief line appeared beneath the logo. Override capabilities active. She nearly dropped her phone. Meanwhile, Carla returned to the galley and pulled Tobias aside. Her whisper wasn't as quiet this time. "I think he's someone," she hissed. "Not just a passenger. Someone real." Tobias scoffed. "You're overreacting, probably a forged badge. Then why the hell does he have that screen?" she snapped. Tobias frowned. "You saw his screen?" "No, but Yuna saw it. She's filming everything." They both turned toward first class. Yuna's camera was already facing them. Carla's expression faltered. Leo in his row grinned. Back in economy, Mama Rose sat serene. She hadn't moved much, but her eyes hadn't left Malik once. Not during the challenge, not during the card reveal, not during the shift in posture from dismissed to dangerous. She pressed her palm lightly against her chest again. This time she whispered, "You waited? Now they're the ones sweating." And they were, because in a cabin full of power suits, designer scarves, and frequent flyer egos, the quietest man had just declared his ownership without saying the words. The storm was coming, and they were still pretending it was sunny. It started with the envelope. Darla Wynne, draped in a navy wrap and pearl necklace, leaned slightly into the aisle. Her hand moved fast but precise, a gesture practiced more times than it should have been. From her clutch, she produced a slim, tan envelope. Her eyes didn't shift. Carla was walking by. Darla brushed her wrist against the flight attendant's. The envelope changed hands. Carla slipped it into the inner pocket of her blazer like it was nothing but the words. "No thanks." Just a nod. 3 rows back, Leo's lens zoomed. He caught the whole thing. "What was that?" he whispered. Whispered what? His caption blinked onto the live feed. "Bribery on board?" The chat exploded. "Yo, rewind that! Did she just pay her? Why?" The timer in Leo's mind started ticking. One thing. In the cabin's rear corner, Tobias plugged into the maintenance port beside the galley curtain. A flick of his stylus and Malik's name vanished from the flight manifest. Seat 2A, vacant. To the system, he no longer existed. Elijah, 6 rows behind in economy, watched on his custom rig. He smiled without joy, tapping a soft key on his interface. System breach detected, record initialized. He logged every keystroke Tobias entered. 2 things. Up front, Una glanced at her phone, startled by the number. 204,118 live viewers. Her voice dropped to a whisper, but the mic caught it. 200,000. They're watching this live. She angled her camera toward Carla and Tobias, now whispering too close, too panicked. She panned to Malik, still calm. The hashtags were multiplying faster than she could post them. Orion BS, erased in first. Seat silent no more. 3 things. Malik tapped his device once, then again. A line of code sent itself across a silent, encrypted channel. In the belly of the plane, a relay flicked green. Elijah's tablet lit up with the words "Theta phase activated." He began uploading everything: video logs, sound data, facial recognition timestamps, and real-time telemetry, to a private server called Ethos AI. A watcher of watchers. A system designed to detect patterns of abuse inside institutions that pretend none exist. 4 things. Near the emergency exit, an older man stood, not tall, not loud, but the entire cabin felt the shift. His voice cracked slightly, the kind of voice that had once asked permission before speaking, but not anymore. "I've seen this game for 40 years, he said. Heads turned, his hand trembled slightly as he pointed toward Malik. First it was seats, then schools, then offices. Always a reason, always a rule, always a glitch. Today I say, enough. No one stopped him, not Carla, not Tobias, not Darla. 5 things, all in 5 minutes. Leo whispered, almost breathless, "This isn't a flight anymore, it's a broadcast." And on row 2A, Malik didn't need to speak. He only needed to sit still, because the silence around him had turned electric. The system was unraveling, and everyone could feel it. The clock wasn't ticking anymore. It was counting down. The tone on the cabin speaker was just a notch too sharp. "Ladies and gentlemen," Carla's voice rang through, polished and poised. "As per Orion Air policy, we are now requesting that all passengers disable their mobile devices and discontinue any streaming activity. This is a security measure and your cooperation is appreciated." She paused, long enough to let the silence vibrate, then added, "Failure to comply may result in notification to ground security upon landing." No turbulence, but the atmosphere buckled. Phones didn't lower. If anything, they lifted higher. In the galley, Tobias moved fast. Sweat glistened at his hairline. He slid a black device into the panel behind the service curtain, connecting it to the plane's main network node. He pressed hard. Network suppression mode engaged. Back in row 16, Elijah Tran's tablet flickered, then recalibrated. A new message scrolled across the screen. Override detected. Counterstream initiated. Elijah cracked his knuckles. A few keystrokes later, his system flooded the network with bandwidth expansion protocols, bypassing Tobias's suppression commands. Every passenger's Wi-Fi connection surged. The plane's signal, meant to stream weather and safety info, was now running at 5 times normal strength. Una blinked at her phone. "Full signal?" she muttered. "They tried to cut us off, and it boosted." She looked at Malik. He hadn't moved. She smiled. Leo whispered into his stream, "They're trying to shut this down, but they just made it louder." He flipped his phone to selfie mode. "If they think this'll go quiet, they picked the wrong generation." The comments roared. "Don't stop the stream. We see you, Carla. This is our Rosa Parks moment." Una opened another app. She linked her stream to TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. 3 feeds, 3 audiences, numbers stacked like dominoes. Elijah's interface recorded packet logs identifying Tobias's system ID, Carla's voice channel, and the administrative override log. Each file beamed straight to Ethos AI. In first class, Carla walked briskly down the aisle. "Ma'am, I'll need you to put that away," she told Una. Una didn't even blink. "On what grounds?" "FAA regulation." "Quote it." Carla froze. Una kept streaming. Passengers were no longer just observers, they were collaborators. Phones tilted, lenses turned. Everyone was watching everyone. And in the middle of it all sat Mama Rose. She hadn't moved since Chapter 1. Hands folded over her chest, eyes locked on her son. She didn't film. She didn't tweet, but when a shaft of light broke through the cabin shade and fell across her face, her presence radiated through the camera lenses. Leo's viewers snapped screenshots of her, silhouette strong, eyes unblinking, pride like armor. The caption wrote itself, "This woman's son is changing the world mid-flight." The image went viral in seconds. On the airline's back end, Tobias's console beeped again. System fire breach. Authority escalated. He cursed under his breath. Malik's tablet was glowing now. But he didn't touch it. He just let it glow. The network couldn't be silenced. The cabin couldn't be hushed. And Mama Rose? She didn't blink. Malik Drayton didn't rise. He didn't gesture. He simply said, "Open the floor." A soft chime echoed through the cabin as the overhead panels in first class began to lower. Folded LCD screens, previously dormant, flickered to life one by one across the aisle. The Orion Air corporate logo shimmered briefly. Then a feed appeared, clearer than anything the plane's entertainment system had ever broadcast. A boardroom, no windows, frosted glass walls, faces around a polished table, 10 of them, silent, blinking in confusion. One woman at the far end of the table hastily reached to cover her webcam. Another man pressed a call button on his earpiece, mouthing security, but the feed continued, unstoppable, like a tide already inside the walls. A female voice from the screen spoke first. "Why are we in session? This wasn't scheduled." Malik's voice reached them from cabin to boardroom. "Because your airline has made a choice," he said, "and now it's time the consequences were seen by the owners." The screen split, half showing the boardroom, half streaming live footage from the flight. The camera zeroed in on Carla, who now stood frozen near the beverage cart. Another feed showed Tobias's terminal, his tampering. A third, the envelope passed from Darla's hand to Carla's, each action documented, labeled, time-stamped. Malik remained seated. In the boardroom, a silver-haired man stood. "Who authorized this access?" Elijah's voice answered before Malik could. "Your system did. It's just never had to obey someone who owned 54%. Gasps rippled across the screens. The board's chair tried to interrupt. "This is a breach!" Malik cut him off without volume, just presence. "No, this is a review." Behind him, passengers leaned forward. A teenager across the aisle turned her phone upward, recording the screens. A young boy whispered to his mother, "Is he the boss of the plane?" She didn't answer, but she squeezed his hand. Una adjusted her tripod. Leo whispered, "This is wild." Carla stepped back, just one pace, but everyone saw it. Her authority had drained out like air from a punctured tire. Tobias tried to close his laptop, but it locked him out. Access denied. Darla's hands trembled as she adjusted her scarf. Then another screen lit up, this time from Elijah's feed. "Additional records located," his voice said. 6 past incidents, same staff, same pattern. On the screen, short videos rolled. A black woman denied boarding. A Latino family moved to the back of the plane. An indigenous man's bag randomly flagged 4 times. All with Carla. All with Tobias. As the clips played, gasps echoed. Not from the boardroom, but from the cabin. Yuna's live stream chat went wild. "This is systemic. I flew Orion last year. Now I wonder." An older man across the aisle wiped his eye, muttering, "Same faces, different decade." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was electric. Then, from the boardroom screen, a quiet voice said, "And he never raised his voice." Malik simply looked into the lens. "We don't need rage to rebuild, just receipts." The courtroom was in the sky now, and justice had boarding priority. Malik didn't move quickly. He didn't need to. With one finger, he tapped the final command on his device. A confirmation prompt flashed. "Global flight suspension? Confirm execution?" He pressed yes. A low hum pulsed beneath the cabin floor, almost imperceptible. Then the cabin lights dimmed for a brief moment, flickering like a breath being held. Screens across the plane turned blue. A message appeared. "All Orion Air flights temporarily suspended. Controlled shutdown initiated by primary shareholder." Passengers looked at each other in stunned silence. Then, the live feed from the boardroom showed the first sign of real panic. One executive stood, knocking over his chair. "We can't suspend global operations from inside a plane," he barked. Elijah's voice came through calmly. "You can't, but he can." On the ground across the United States, a chain reaction had already begun. Flight towers received emergency directives. Orion planes, more than 400 of them, were rerouted. Some returned to gate. Others were held mid-air. The system was frozen. Airports buzzed with confusion. CNN and NBC interrupted regular programming. Breaking. Orion Air Network suspended by lead shareholder during flight. Inside the plane, passengers began to whisper louder. Yuna turned her camera toward the window. Another Orion aircraft, parked on the adjacent runway, powered down. The engine slowed to a halt. Leo narrated on stream. "It's not just us. It's the whole damn airline." Malik didn't gloat. He simply set the tablet down in his lap. Then Elijah sent the next packet of data to the boardroom. Dozens of files, internal memos, fabricated safety inspections, ghost employee accounts used to embezzle funds. The board member leaned forward, hands over her mouth. This goes beyond discrimination," she said. "It's fraud. This is criminal." Another voice whispered, "We weren't just negligent, we were complicit." The cabin fell quiet again as the magnitude hit. Passengers looked not just at Malik now, but at each other. Stories began to surface. A man near row 8 spoke up. "2 years ago I got bumped from first class last minute. They told me it was a weight balance issue." A woman nodded. "They once told me I wasn't dressed appropriately to board." Yuna spun her camera to capture them. "Say it now," she urged. "Say it loud." The live stream grew to 800,000 viewers, and still Malik hadn't spoken again. His silence was louder than thunder. In the front row, Mama Rose watched him. Her eyes didn't blink. Her hand remained gently over her chest. Then, as the final boardroom screen dimmed, she closed her eyes. Not from sadness, not exhaustion, but for the first time in years she rested. A single tear rolled down her cheek, not for what was lost, but for what was finally being seen. Justice didn't knock on the door. It walked in, and made itself at home. The cabin lights had returned to their usual hum, but nothing felt normal. Then came the message. Screens throughout the cabin blinked once. A new prompt appeared. Termination executed. Carla Vance, Tobias Klein, Darla Wynn. 3 names, in red, no confusion. Carla stared at it. What the hell is this? Her hands hovered over the seatback screen like she could swipe it away. Another message followed. Access revoked. Credentials nullified. She turned toward Malik, voice rising. "You can't do this from a plane!" Malik looked up slowly, calmly. "I'm not using a plane, I'm using the system." Her mouth opened to fire back, but no sound came. Her phone buzzed. denied. Tablet locked. She jabbed buttons, each tap echoing louder than the last. She spun toward the rows of passengers, searching for backup. "This is harassment," she snapped, voice brittle. "I demand anyone intervene." But no one moved. Eyes dropped, heads turned. The fear she once commanded had been replaced by silence. She wasn't feared now. She was irrelevant. Across the aisle, Tobias fumbled with his laptop. The screen blinked, then blacked out. A red warning flashed. "This device has been retired." He stood abruptly, chair scraping. "You don't understand. I have clearance. I've been with Orion for 12 years. He yanked his badge from his lanyard, pressing it against the seatback reader. Nothing. He tried to call his wife. No signal, no connection, no help. He slumped into the aisle seat, mumbling, "They said I was safe. They promised." The system didn't care. Behind them, Darla silently slid her scarf from her neck. He didn't speak, didn't cry. She just stood, walked down the aisle, and stopped at the curtain, separating first class from economy. A camera lens from Yuna's live stream followed her. No zoom, no commentary, just presence. She paused once, hand on the curtain, then vanished behind it. Malik said nothing. On his screen, a final message appeared. System lock complete, integrity restored. He breathed out. No smile, no triumph. From the back of the cabin, a single person clapped, then another, then a wave. It wasn't applause for revenge, it was relief, a release. The sound was soft, but filled the cabin, claps overlapping like rain on metal. Someone in row 9 wept quietly. Another whispered, "Finally." Mama Rose didn't clap. She simply leaned forward, her hand touching Malik's shoulder. He looked at her, the first smile of the flight. Small, tired, real. Not because justice had landed, but because it had finally taken off. The plane floated in silence, not mechanical, emotional. A hush that hovered, thick as fog, weightless yet impossible to ignore. Near row 4, a woman turned to her daughter, voice barely above a whisper. "He didn't yell," she said. "Not once." The girl blinked, still stunned. "He didn't even stand up." Yuna's live stream chat exploded. Someone clipped the entire moment when Malik had calmly tapped the screen. Another user replayed the montage of the flight. No shouting, no threats, just quiet dismantling. A trending title emerged, "Calm Justice." On Twitter, a lawyer posted, "This is how systems change, not in riots, but in clarity." TikTok flooded with edits of Malik's voice synced to orchestral builds, each beat timed with his silent commands. One clip captioned, "Power," without volume, racked up 1 million views in 20 minutes. In the front row, Carla sat with her hands limp, eyes glazed. Her power wasn't taken, it was deactivated. Tobias slumped next to her, muttering about logins frozen out of a system he once gamed. Darla hadn't returned. The cabin door stayed closed, but the room had changed. A young flight attendant, no older than 23, leaned close to the lead steward and whispered, "Are they really gone?" The steward just nodded slowly. "Looks like it." At the cockpit, a message blinked on the co-pilot's monitor. "Continue course, oversight transferred, internal chain restructured. Clearance, Malik Drayton." The pilot exhaled hard, then chuckled softly. "I guess we've got a new boss." He adjusted the course slightly, fingers steady. Back in the cabin, a man with gray temples looked over at Malik. "I've spent 30 years speaking truth and getting escorted off flights," he said. "And you? You did it without raising your voice." Malik nodded but said nothing. Across the aisle, Leo finally asked the question everyone was waiting for. "Sir," he said, holding the phone toward Malik, "I know you don't owe us a word, but if I could ask one thing." What just happened? Malik turned slightly, his tone even, steady. They shouted, I listened, they controlled. I changed the controls. He didn't say more. Didn't need to. Screens throughout the cabin dimmed. One final message appeared. Public systems updated. Internal review complete. All flight privileges rebalanced. Passengers exchanged glances. One man wiped his eyes. A teenage girl clutched her grandmother's hand tighter. A woman pressed her fingers to her lips as if sealing a vow she couldn't yet name. A teenager wiped his eyes before pretending it was allergies. Even the young flight attendant stood stiff by the galley, blinking too often, clutching her notepad like a lifeline. Mama Rose looked out the window, then back at Malik. They didn't just hear you, she whispered. They can't unhear you now. Malik didn't answer. Just placed the tablet gently into his briefcase. The seatbelt sign chimed. Descent had begun, but nobody moved. They weren't flying anymore. They were landing in a world where silence could lead revolutions, and where justice didn't scream. It simply arrived. The wheels kissed the tarmac and the jet slowed to a smooth, commanding crawl. Outside Gate C-17 at Reagan National Airport, a crowd had already formed. Cameramen jostled for angles, reporters held up phones and mics, some held signs, Truth at 30,000 feet, We see you, Malik, and Calm Justice. Among them were students from Howard University, holding up banners that read, We witnessed history. Civil rights organizers, clergy members, and quiet-faced elders stood together, shoulder to shoulder. One man, a gray-bearded veteran in uniform, raised a sign above his head, You spoke for us. A teenage activist live-streamed from her phone, whispering, He's coming out. He's really coming out. Her feed jumped to 1.2 million viewers in under 90 seconds. Inside the jet, the passengers remained seated. No one moved, not because of the seatbelt sign, but because they all knew something else was still happening. The flight crew glanced at each other. A message buzzed in the pilot's console. Media presence confirmed. Malik Drayton authorized to address press. One of the attendants leaned over. Mr. Drayton, they're asking if you'll speak. Malik stood slowly. He adjusted his cuffs, picked up nothing but his briefcase. Only a few words. As he stepped out of the aircraft, a hush rippled through the crowd, then a storm of clicks, flashes, voices. He walked to a modest platform. No mic, no podium, just wind and presence. And then he spoke. This wasn't revenge. It was rebalancing. Now we reform. Silence followed. Then someone clapped, then another, and suddenly the terminal shook not with rage, but resonance. Within hours, his words appeared everywhere, chiseled into protest art, inked onto shirts, turned into avatars. Trending worldwide, now we reform. Then came the announcement. Malik launched Ethos AI, a public real-time bias monitoring system. It integrated with transit, retail, airlines, and HR software. Any institution could install it. It flagged discriminatory behaviors as they happened and sent alerts to governing bodies. No fees, no ads, no corporate backdoor. One press release read, We can't change hearts overnight, but we can monitor hands. At a bus terminal in Oakland, a driver received an alert when a customer refused service to a black passenger. The incident, captured and verified, triggered an instant review. Within 2 hours, the passenger was suspended, pending investigation, and the driver thanked publicly for doing the right thing. In New York, a manager at a boutique store received a nudge from Ethos AI after an employee consistently followed customers of color but not others. The data was anonymized but clear. A quiet conversation turned into staff-wide retraining. Within 24 hours, 6.4 million downloads. Over 200 transit agencies enrolled. More than 40 Fortune 500 companies applied to pilot it. Commentators on news channels debated whether this was the start of something bigger than even Malik realized. At home, Mama Rose watched it unfold on TV. The news anchor began, "This morning, the country landed into a new chapter. The age of reform has begun." Her mailbox overflowed. Not with bills, with letters. Letters from mothers, fathers, teachers, veterans, janitors, nurses. One said, "Because of your son, my daughter knows she belongs in any seat she chooses." Another simply read, "You raised a system changer." A third came in a lavender envelope from a woman in Alabama. It read, "I was pulled from a first-class seat in 1989, told I didn't belong there. I never fought it. I never even told my kids. But today I watched your son say what I never could, and I cried. Thank you for raising him. Thank you for healing something in me." Mama Rose stood on her porch, a mug of coffee in hand. The air was crisp, her back straight, her eyes soft. Neighbors approached slowly, some bringing baked goods, others just a hand on her shoulder. One little boy handed her a drawing, a plane in the sky with the words, "Thanks, Malik." And for the first time in a long, long while, she smiled. Not because her son had won, but because he had built something that couldn't be undone. The aircraft that once carried Malik Drayton now sat quietly inside a hangar at Dulles Airport. Flight 349 had returned to maintenance, stripped of passengers but not of its history. The cabin was dark save for the soft amber glow of a single light over seat 2A. A young flight attendant, the same one who had watched Malik from the galley, walked down the aisle alone. Her name tag read, Kendra. She paused by the infamous row, heart oddly full. The seat was perfectly arranged, belt buckled, armrests straightened, as if still waiting for someone. Tucked neatly beneath the armrest was a folded card. She picked it up, slowly, like it might hume with electricity. On the front was handwriting, neat, deliberate. "This seat is for everyone who was ever told they didn't belong here." Kendra held the card to her chest for a moment. Then she placed it back exactly where she found it. Cut to images across the country. A group of high school students on their first flight, all seated in row 1, beaming. A retired grandmother with silver braids stepping confidently into first class, nodding at the attendant who smiles back. A city council in Milwaukee passing a resolution. Equal access to space is a civic right. The ripple had become a wave. 1 year later, inside the Smithsonian National Museum of American History, a new exhibit drew lines out the door. At the center, the actual seat 2A from Flight 349, encased in glass, preserved just as it was. Beside it, the original card, and above it, a screen looping a single moment. Malik, standing on the tarmac, saying, "This wasn't revenge, it was rebalancing. Now we reform." On the plaque beneath the seat, donated by the people who took their seat back. Outside, amid a crowd of field-tripping students and tourists, a man in a dark coat stood back from the museum entrance. He didn't go in, just watched. Malik Drayton. He stood with his hands in his pockets, unnoticed, unguarded. A young girl, maybe 8 or 9, tugged her father's hand and pointed toward the glass. "Can I sit there too someday?" Her father smiled. "You already can." Malik heard it. He turned away, smiled softly, and disappeared into the city. No grand finale, no fireworks, just the seat. Still waiting, and no one would ever be told again, not there. Thank you for staying until the very last word. If this story stirred something in you, a memory, a truth, or just a long breath you didn't know you were holding, share it in the comments. Your voice matters here. Hit that subscribe button. More powerful stories are coming. And remember, some seats are taken, some are denied, but the most powerful ones are reclaimed. Until next time.